Have you ever felt the sudden chill of love slipping away, even when everything around seems unchanged? What if love isn't meant to last forever, but instead moves like the seasons, coming, flourishing, and quietly fading away? How do you recognize the subtle signs that love is fading before it's too late? Love holds an incredible power, lifting us up, shaping who we are, and filling our lives with meaning. When love fills our hearts, it feels eternal, as if nothing in the world could ever shake its foundation. But just like the changing seasons, love too has its cycles. It arrives with warmth and blossoms in full glory, only to sometimes slowly fade away. Not with a bang, but with quiet, almost invisible steps. At first, everything seems just as it was. The words of affection still float in the air, and the daily routines continue without interruption. Yet beneath the surface, something has shifted. The once radiant warmth that colored your connection begins to cool. The laughter, once natural and flowing, now feels forced, like a rehearsed act. Moments that used to bring joy now feel like duties you must fulfill. You sense this change but hesitate to face the truth. You tell yourself it's just a passing phase, clutching onto memories of better times. You hope that trying harder will restore what was lost. But deep down, you know the undeniable truth. Love never fades all at once. It erodes silently, piece by piece, until one morning, you wake up and realize it's gone. Have you ever stared into someone's eyes and felt like they were already a stranger? Sat beside them, yet felt an overwhelming loneliness? The ancient philosopher Seneca once said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." When love begins to slip away, often we are the last to see it. We hold on to what once was, blind to what is now. But there are two unmistakable signs that reveal love is fading, two clear signals that someone has quietly stopped loving you. To truly understand these signs, let me share a story about wisdom, loss, and the painful truth about letting go. Once upon a time, there was a man who had known love in its purest form. He had felt the gentle warmth of a lover's embrace, heard promises whispered softly under the moonlight, and believed that love, once found, would remain forever. But life, unpredictable as it is, had other plans. One day, without warning, things began to change. The words that once held tenderness now felt distant and cold. The laughter that once filled the air grew scarce and hollow. Time spent together, once a sanctuary, started to feel like a burden. At first, he ignored these signs. He told himself love goes through phases, that this was only temporary. He tried harder, searched desperately for answers. Had he done something wrong? Could he fix what was breaking? But the more he reached out, the further she drifted away. She was there, yet absent. Her presence a mere shadow of what it once was. Night after night, he lay awake, tormented by questions, haunted by silence, and overwhelmed by uncertainty. Desperate for guidance, he sought the wisdom of an old sage who lived high atop a mountain. The journey was long and arduous, but the weight in his heart was heavier than any distance. When he finally reached the sage, he poured out his pain, hoping to understand what had happened to love's once radiant flame. Picking up from the last part, after hearing the man's doubts and pain, the old sage didn't offer empty words of comfort. Instead, he stood and motioned for the man to follow him. Together, they walked into a quiet garden where the wind gently whispered through the leaves, creating a peaceful melody. The sage pointed to a flower whose petals were beginning to wither and fall. "Look at this flower," he said. It was once vibrant and full of life, but now its petals are dropping one by one. Do you hear it crying? Do you see how it clings to the past, desperately trying to stay in bloom? The man shook his head, his eyes fixed thoughtfully on the fragile flower. "When love fades," the sage continued, "it does not shatter into pieces, nor does it explode loudly. It slowly dissolves, silently and quietly. And those who stop loving make unmistakable gestures. If you look closely, you will see them too." The sage turned toward a nearby bowl of water, knelt down, dipped his hand in, and slowly lifted it, letting a few drops fall back into the bowl. "Look at how the water slips effortlessly from my fingers. Do you see? Love, when it fades, behaves the same way. It doesn't leave with anger, but with quiet detachment." The man watched the droplets fall, each one disappearing without resistance. He thought about the laughter that no longer came, the conversations that had become hollow, and the presence that felt more like an absence. "But if love fades so quietly," he asked, "how can we recognize it in time?" The sage nodded knowingly, as if he had anticipated the question. "The heart always knows the truth before the mind does. You can feel it in the smallest details, in the silences that grow longer, in embraces that are no longer as tight, in eyes that no longer seek yours. It will feel as though you are living in the echo of something that once was." The man lowered his gaze, recognizing those feelings within himself. "What happens if we ignore these signs?" he asked. The sage sighed, looking once more at the fading flower. "Then we become prisoners of a love that no longer exists, holding on to a shadow while the real thing has already left." He then picked up a small mirror and handed it to the man. "Look at yourself," he said. "This is who you are today. But if you wait long enough, even the most familiar face will become a stranger. When someone stops loving you." The man stared at his reflection. He was still himself, but something had changed. The toll of the sage said, "It's not just their presence that fades. The way they look at you changes. The tone of their voice shifts. The energy they once gave you is no longer there. The person who once knew you so well now sees you as someone unfamiliar." The man clenched the mirror tightly, staring at his own face. Had he changed too? Had he become a stranger in the eyes of the one he loved? The sage placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Love transforms those it touches. When two souls entwine, they shape each other. But when love fades, the bond loosens. What was once unity becomes distance, and in their eyes, you are no longer the same person." The wind stirred the garden, and the fading flower released another petal. The man shivered and whispered, "So what remains?" The sage's expression softened. "What you were before love, what you have become because of it, and what you can be now that you have the space to grow again." For the first time, the man did not feel despair. He felt something lighter, not an ending, but a beginning. He had come seeking answers, but what he found was wisdom. And the first sign? Emotional distance. The man stood silently, holding the mirror the sage had given him, as if looking deeply into himself. Building on the lesson about emotional distance, the man continued to gaze deeply into the reflection in the mirror, a familiar yet strangely unfamiliar face. He knew something inside him had shifted, but he had resisted fully seeing that truth. The sage returned to the bowl of water, knelt down once more, dipped his hand in, then slowly lifted it, letting droplets fall gently back into the bowl. "Look closely," he said. "Water does not resist, it does not cling. It simply slips away effortlessly and naturally." The man watched each droplet fade away into the air. "That is how love fades," the sage explained further. "Not with a loud explosion, nor with a final goodbye, but with small moments of absence. Slowly, quietly, without announcement or drama. Love does not always leave physically, but it withdraws in spirit." The man thought about the one he loved. She was still there, still present in his life, but something was missing. The warmth, the ease, the effortless connection that once bound them had grown weak. "When someone loses love for you," the sage said, "the first sign is emotional distance. It happens so subtly that at first you may not even notice. But over time, the absence grows until you can no longer deny it." The man took a deep breath and asked, "How does this distance begin?" The sage folded his hands, pausing thoughtfully as if choosing his words with care. "At first it's in the small things," he said. "The way conversations become shorter, the way laughter grows less frequent, the way silence fills spaces where words once lived." The man nodded slowly, recalling how their once endless talks had shrunk to brief exchanges. He had convinced himself it was just fatigue, stress, or temporary distractions. But now, hearing the sage's words, he realized the truth. "When someone still loves you," the sage continued, "they seek you out. They want to share moments, thoughts, even the smallest details of their day. Their presence is not just physical, but emotional. You can feel their connection, their attention, their desire to be close to you." The man remembered how she used to light up when she saw him, how she would listen intently, how she would reach for his hand without thinking, but those moments had faded. "When love begins to slip away," the sage said, "so does that presence. They stop sharing their thoughts. Their laughter no longer comes easily. Conversations feel like obligations, not joys." The man swallowed hard. "But what if they're just tired or distracted? What if it's only temporary?" The sage nodded. "Distractions come and go, but when love fades, the pattern does not change. It is not a single moment of distance, but a gradual and continuous withdrawal. What once felt natural now feels forced." The man lowered his gaze. "So what should I do when I see this happening?" The sage looked at him with steady eyes. "You must recognize the truth," he said, "and you must accept it. Emotional distance is not something you can force back into closeness. It is a sign, a message, a truth waiting to be seen." The man felt a tightness in his chest. He had spent so much time trying to hold on, trying to bring back what was fading. "You cannot chase someone who is already walking away," the sage said. "You cannot beg for a presence that is no longer freely given. Love is either there, or it is not. It cannot be negotiated." The wind stirred the leaves in the garden, and the fading flower released another petal. "When someone loses love for you," the sage continued, "they do not tell you outright. They do not make grand declarations. They simply stop reaching for you the way they once did. That is the first sign." The man closed his eyes, feeling the truth settle deep inside. He had known this, but had refused to see it. He had ignored the growing silence, the lack of excitement in her voice, the distance that crept between them like a shadow. The sage spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "Do not deceive yourself." Continuing from the warning about self-deception, When emotional distance appears, the sage emphasized that this distance is rarely accidental. It is the heart pulling away, one step at a time, and you must ask yourself, will you chase after what is slipping away, or will you have the courage to let it go? The man did not answer. He didn't need to. He had clung too long to an illusion, afraid to face the truth. The sage stood up and motioned toward the path leading down the mountain. "Come with me," he said. "You have seen how love fades in absence, but there is another way. One that is even clearer, one that leaves no doubt." The man hesitated, then followed. As he walked, he felt lighter. The weight of false hope began to lift. He was not yet ready to let go completely, but for the first time, he saw the truth. And that was the first step. The second sign, the sage said, is when they no longer see you. They walked through the quiet garden. The air was still, yet something felt different within the man. He had begun to see the truth. He had spent too long ignoring the first sign, convincing himself that the growing silence and fading connection were just temporary. But now he could no longer deny it. The sage stopped by a stone bench and turned to face him. "There is something else you must understand," he said. "When someone loses love for you, it is not only their presence that fades, but also the way they see you." The man frowned. "What do you mean?" The sage reached into his robe and pulled out a small mirror, handing it to the man. "Look at yourself," he said. The man lifted the mirror and stared at his own reflection. It was his face. The same one he had always known, but something about it felt different. "This is how you see yourself," the sage said. "But do you know how she sees you now?" The man lowered the mirror. "When love is strong," the sage continued, "it is not just in words or actions. It is in the way someone looks at you. Their eyes carry warmth, recognition, and understanding. They see you not just as a person, but as someone who matters deeply to them." The man thought back to the past. He remembered how she used to look at him, how her eyes would light up when he entered the room. He remembered how she would lean in when he spoke, how her presence felt fully with him. But then he thought about now, the way her gaze no longer held the same warmth, the way she seemed distracted even when she was near. "When love fades," the sage said, "so does the way they look at you. They no longer see you as they once did. The admiration in their eyes weakens. The attention they once gave so freely becomes forced. Their voice loses its warmth. Their laughter feels different. And one day, you realize that the person who once knew every part of you now seems like a stranger." The man felt his chest tighten. "But how do I know if this is real?" he asked. "What if I'm just imagining it? What if I'm overthinking?" The sage nodded. "Doubt is natural. The mind will always try to hold on to what feels familiar. But the truth is not in your thoughts. It is in their actions." The man remained silent, waiting. "When someone no longer sees you the same way," the sage said, "it's not just in their eyes. It's in the way they speak to you, the way they respond to you." Building on the previous lesson about how someone no longer sees you the same way, the sage went on to explain other subtle changes you'll feel. How they no longer listen to you as before. How the energy between you shifts in a way you can't quite explain. The wanderer exhaled slowly. He knew exactly what the sage meant. "When love is strong," the sage continued, "everything flows effortlessly. Conversations come naturally. Presence is a gift, not a task. But when love fades, words become mechanical, gestures lose their meaning. and you begin to feel like you're talking to someone who's no longer truly there, even though they're right in front of you. The wanderer clenched his fists. So what am I supposed to do when they no longer see me as before? Should I fight for them to remember? The sage smiled gently, but kept his gaze steady. You cannot force someone to see you as they once did, he said. Just as you cannot stop a river from flowing or a flower from shedding its petals, you cannot make someone feel what they no longer feel. The wanderer looked away, struggling to accept the words. He recalled Marcus Aurelius's teaching. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Don't waste your energy trying to hold onto what's already slipping away. The sage took the mirror from the wanderer's hands and tucked it back into his robe. The second sign is clear, he said. When someone loses love for you, they no longer look at you with the same eyes. You'll feel it in the way they speak to you, listen to you, and interact with you. No matter how hard you try, you cannot force them to see you as they once did. The wanderer let out a slow breath. He had come to the mountain searching for answers, hoping to fix what was broken, but now he realized that was never the true purpose of this journey. The sage adjusted his robe and said, Come, there is one more thing you must understand. The wanderer followed him, his steps heavier, but his mind clearer. He didn't know what would come next, but deep inside, he knew he had spent too long trying to hold on to something already gone. They walked down a narrow path, the wanderer's heart heavy with realization. He had resisted the truth too long, holding on to what was already slipping away. Now, he could no longer ignore it. He turned to the sage and asked, If these signs are so clear, if love has truly faded, what should I do? Should I fight for it? Should I try to bring it back? The sage stopped walking, turned to face the wanderer and spoke calmly. You cannot force water to stay between your fingers. You cannot ask a flower to keep its petals forever. Love is the same. If it has changed, it is not something you can control. The wanderer lowered his gaze. He had spent so much energy trying to make things go back to the way they were, believing that if he tried hard enough, he could stop love from slipping away. But shouldn't I at least try? He asked. Shouldn't I fight for something that once meant so much? The sage's expression remained steady. Many believe that love can be saved by effort alone. They think that if they say the right words, do the right things, they can make someone love them again. But love does not work that way. The wanderer remained silent, listening. Love that must be begged for is not love, the sage continued. It is dependency. It is attachment to something that no longer exists as it once did. Those words hit the wanderer deeply. He had always believed that love was something to be fought for, something that could be repaired if enough effort was made. If I do nothing, he asked, does that mean I am giving up? The sage shook his head gently. Letting go is not giving up. Building on the previous lesson that letting go is not defeat, but wisdom, the sage explained the true meaning of release. Letting go is not surrender, he said, but a deep understanding that love cannot be held by force. If someone has already begun to walk away, chasing them will not bring them back. It will only prolong your suffering. The wanderer exhaled slowly, staring at the ground. He recalled Seneca's words, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today." You must not waste your life waiting for something that has already left. He swallowed hard. realizing he had been living in the past, replaying memories, trying to find a way to bring back what was gone. He had been fighting reality instead of accepting it. The sage placed a hand on his shoulder. "The only thing you can control is yourself," he said. "You cannot force someone to love you. You cannot stop love from changing, but you can choose how you respond. You can choose to let go with grace rather than hold on with fear." The wanderer looked up at the sky, feeling a weight in his chest. "Then what remains for me?" he asked. "If love is gone, what is left?" The sage smiled gently. "What you were before love," he said. "What you have become because of it, and what you can be now that you have the space to grow again." The words settled into the wanderer's heart. He had been so focused on what he had lost that he forgot what still remained. "You do not lose yourself just because you lose love," the sage continued. "You are still here. You are still capable of living, growing, and becoming something new." The wanderer nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand. He had been afraid of letting go because he thought it meant losing everything. But now, he saw the truth. Letting go was not a loss but an awakening, the first step toward reclaiming himself. The power of letting go. The wanderer stood silently, absorbing the sage's words. He had spent so much time fearing the end of love, believing that if he let go, he would lose something irreplaceable. But now he saw things differently. Letting go was not an act of weakness. It was an act of wisdom. The sage gestured toward the fading flower in the garden. Another petal had fallen, carried away by the wind. "Do you see?" the sage said. "The flower does not resist. It does not hold on to what it has already lost. It simply allows nature to take its course." The wanderer watched as the wind moved through the trees. He realized he had been holding on to something that was already gone, refusing to accept the truth. "The pain is not in love fading," the sage continued. "The pain is in resisting what is already happening. When we cling to what no longer exists, we create our own suffering." The wanderer exhaled. He had been holding on to a version of love that no longer existed, hoping that if he fought hard enough he could bring it back. But now he understood that love is not something to be controlled. It is something to be experienced. And when it changes, the only thing left to do is accept it with grace. He turned to the sage. "So what should I do now?" The sage smiled. "You move forward," he said. "Not with regret, but with gratitude. Not with bitterness, but with wisdom. Love is not something you own. It is something you live. And when it leaves, you do not chase it. You open the door and let it go." For the first time, the wanderer felt at peace. Standing at the edge of the mountain, looking out over the vast landscape before him, the man felt a profound change within. He had come seeking answers, hoping to find a way to bring back what was lost. But instead he found something much greater: clarity and peace. Now he understood that love is not something to possess, but something to experience. When love fades, chasing after it only brings more suffering. The true path is to accept, to let go, and to move forward with wisdom. What about you? Have you noticed these signs in someone? Have you felt that silent distance, that growing estrangement between two people? If so, perhaps it is time to let go, not with anger or despair, but with the awareness that true love does not need to be forced. Letting go does not mean losing. It means respecting the natural flow of life. Have you ever held on tightly to something that was already gone? Have you ever struggled to accept the truth? Share your experience. Your story might help someone else find their own clarity.